It's simple, really. Great stories with a good cup of tea. It's the Tea with Mike show. On this episode of the show, we welcomed Jeremiah Fox. We spoke about his transition from doing 2 degrees in music to running a thriving business in a pandemic. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Tea with Mike show. Always excited to be having a conversation with someone new or somebody that I've begun to know largely through social media. So really excited today to talking to Jeremiah. Welcome to Tea with Mike, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So obviously welcome to the show. And then, so let's start with, I believe you're from Nashville, Tennessee. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up there?
Yeah, Nashville in the 70s and 80s was like not the same as it is now. It was kind of sleepy, just nothing but country music. It's always been kind of a major hub for recording and technology. But there wasn't the draw to it back then that there is now. It was pretty seedy. Lower Broad was kind of a funky place. It's not, there weren't like craft distilleries and all the fancy stuff there is now. At the time, the Grand Ole Opry was right in town, which was really cool because you would see people like Conway Twitty and Dolly Parton. They were just like normal people kind of walking around. But just like classic, man, baseball games and bubble gum and soda and bad pizza, which is why I left and moved to New York. Had to get that good pizza.
Nice. So are there any standout moments from your childhood and growing up in Nashville? Is it a good place to grow up?
Yeah, I mean, it was for me. It was the only sense of like normalcy, I guess you could say, there when I was 10 years old, and after that it was just like a tornado, and nothing seemed normal. My parents split up, and so for me it was this idyllic nostalgia that I've kind of always chased after in my life, and now that I'm a father, like wanting to provide that kind of feeling for my kids, for how they've grown up. I think I've done a good job of that, but yeah, it just represented like all things kind of like stable and good and pure. Maybe it was like the time in my life, and maybe I think it was also the time in history that was the age of Aquarius, and like my parents kind of had this like hippie vibe going on, and especially my dad. It just kind of like represented all things good. I mean, the rolling hills outside of Nashville and like the parks and stuff. It was like 1980 or 81. Like I'll just never forget that. I was just a little kid, but it was just the most impressive thing. I have a memory of that, but that's a standout in the world's.
Awesome, man. And then, so what were some of your favorite subjects in school?
In between classes, I was very studious. In fact, I dropped out of 2 different high schools. Eventually got my GED, sat for the SATs, called off the street at 20 years old, and somehow ended up getting into a 4-year university. And I now have a master's degree in music performance. So not the academic type. I didn't even enjoy music in school because it was like marching band and it kind of sucked. If I had a good math teacher, I would totally get down on that. If I had a bad math teacher, I would just, it sucks. But he always got me super excited. And I think mostly because I could just read about it and learn about it on my own. It didn't have to be spoon fed to me. And I could kind of like get in the groove of things and say like, well, that's what you're saying. But I've also heard this, just gave me an opportunity to be like introspective.
Fantastic. Then do you want to tell everyone a little bit about your degree, what sort of things you've studied within the degree, and then where you took the particular degree once you graduated, or things you did even while still doing the degree that are music related.
So I have two music degrees. My undergrad is from the Old Dominion University, which is in Norfolk, Virginia, and that is a Bachelor of Music and Music Performance in Percussion. So I'm a drummer mainly, and I have a master's in music performance from University of Buffalo, also in percussion performance. So I studied all forms of like things you can band, literally from piano down to trash can and everything in between. Studied a lot of theory and composition as well. I had no interest in doing the music education route. I definitely went performance route, which at both schools were very department. Most were doing music education or music something. I also studied composition. I've done produced two of my own full-length albums and written for for preschool, commercial. Most of the work was performance, although I did teach privately, and I probably taught students over the years. But I spent a year focusing on performance. I probably was hired by several over that time span. There were times where I would play 2 different shows a night for at 3 different venues when work was really good. Like I said, I did my own stuff, but it was composed and performed of my was like edgy, really under the to a that kind of approach. So not a money maker, not a lot of sold out show. It turns out the funny realization, because I haven't been an active like performer for about 10 years. I still get calls this time I work with friends, but it's not something I pursue anymore. And we started to do a lot of film work and commercial. People are always like, "Oh, we need some music for this," and I'm like, "Oh, I got tons of music," and I pull out some of my old stuff. And it turns out that I'm really writing music for like television and commercial and movie, but I was trying to do it as like live performance. So a little self-realization moment. Oh, that's why nobody came to our shows, because it's just not where like it wasn't the kind of music you would come and like dance to. Nobody wants to come and dance like that. So, yeah, it was kind of great to realize that it was a little more financially helpful if I learned that 10 years earlier. Like, no regrets. No.
Fantastic. And then, so what's your favorite genre of music?
Oh, the one that mixes them all together whenever it wants.
Can you expand on that?
Again, I mentioned Frank Zappa a few minutes ago. I really love a lot of his live releases from the 80s, because he would switch on a dime, and one tune would start out as like a reggae, which he was not a reggae artist, but he got really good at a certain point. So songs that he used to do as like a country or something like that, he would start out as a reggae, and then within the tune they would just kind of twist and morph. I worked with people and studied with people that used to work for him, and I've heard that he used to write on a napkin and just like tape it to the door of the green room what the set list was going to be, what the time signatures were going to be, and what the styles were going to be. And the band never before the show that like we're going to do apostrophe as a 5/4 reggae. Like they would learn that on their way out of the green room on a handwritten napkin taped to the door. So that stuff it's very representative of life. That's kind of chaotic, and as much as I used to think I love chaos, I really love order. So I chase after chaos. It's something I learned later in life, and that representative of that to me. And that was always kind of what we did. We would create these really hard scenarios, even for us as students, that we couldn't pull off at the time, but we were like, we're going to work this out. So the total chaos. We came to the rehearsal, like, oh my God, and then we'd be able to perform it, and at the performance, people would be like, wow, that was really awesome. Like, it took a lot of hard work, but yeah, I love being able to impose things or to be able to jump really hard, and I feel like Zappa was one and love to listen to him. There's a couple local ones too, and more like underground groups that do the same. There's a group out of Northern California called Stratosphere, who really did an awesome job of kind of blending klezmer, acid jazz, reggae, rock, metal, and
Cool.
sometimes every now and then a little video game music, just like shake it up like a cocktail and spit it out in a track. And just, I love that stuff. And some people are like, this is chaos to me. This is just like, this is like, it's noise, but to me, it's really beautiful. So,
And when you say beautiful, is it because you recognize a little bit of rock? Oh, there's a little bit of soul or whatever it may be, and you just like how they all like intertwine together.
Yeah, no, to
Like the
me, like,
unique sound.
if I could visually represent the way it makes me feel, it would be like standing on like a huge cliff watching the most amazing sunset. Like when I hear it, that's the imagery I get. And other people are like covering their ears and like running cover. And I'm just like, this is so amazing. This is just beautiful. Yeah, it makes me feel.
Nice. And then we may or may not know the answer, but like, do you have any favorite artists? I know you've mentioned Zappa a couple of times already.
Yeah, and like they're like per genre and kind of era, So the first concert I ever attended as a kid was it was like 1987 or 88, and I went to see Motley Crue. It was their Girls, Girls, Girls tour. Now,
Awesome.
anybody that knows anything about me would kind of laugh at that because it's not very deep music, It's just kind of like, especially that era was bubblegum. But that was what really pushed me towards that. Tommy Lee came out and did a drum solo over the crowd and a spinning cage, and I was just like, I want to do that. That's amazing. I pursued that. I was one of finding a drummer. So that group, but no matter how kind of it again, just like I love it. Yeah, definitely. 70s and 80s Zappa. Huge Bob Marley fan, especially late Marley. I was in one of my first paid in a roots reggae band, like 90s, a bunch of West Indian guys, the white drummer band, and just really gave me a schooling on West Indian culture, Jamaican music, and Marley using stardom as a platform for a broad message and to really help people and employ like thousands of people that otherwise would not have gotten employment, like taking care of people. Really, really in terms of Schoenberg for sure, and atonalism, and also what's his name? I'm forgetting it right now. My buddy would smack me because Stravinsky, also like late classical, late romanticism, the modern great stuff. I could go on. There's so many.
Awesome. Okay, so obviously two music degrees, and then then you leave university, and then how did you transition from music to owning the restaurant Della in Brooklyn?
So yeah, my master's was at pretty much. I hung out for just a little period after I finished school. I had good work there. I was teaching a lot. I was playing all the time. But we kind of hit the ceiling in terms of like where we were going to go, and that area can be kind of a sleepy town. So we wanted to chasing something bigger. My wife got a job offer with the New York City Department of Education. She's a math teacher here in New York. Has been for the last 15 years. So I always had my sights kind of set on New York, and to go back a little bit, I've always been in the food industry as well. I got my first like restaurant job at 14 years old, washing dishes and taking out the trash.
Nice.
And I found an equal amount of artistry and expression in food as I did in music. So there was always like this counterpoint with me going back and forth between food and music, where there were times where I was like, I'm done with music. I'm so sick of this shit. I'm going to just make food and not have to deal with that. And then there were times where I'm like, I'm so sick of the food industry. I'm just going to do music. And that was why I ended up getting a master's degree, because it's like, okay, if I do this, back then I had hopes of being a college professor in music, and people were getting those gigs still, like in the late 90s, especially when I was in school. And, they would say back then, well, having an undergrad is good, but if you get your master's degree, then you'll really land a good job. And I'm like, okay, great. So that sounds like cool. Get a master, master's degree. And they were like, really what you need is your PhD. And I'm like, there's something fishy here. And I'm hearing from people like there are no jobs anymore. Like people are staying at them until they die. Like I started to get, friends higher up in university administration, and I was just like, oh man, that sucks. So that was one point where I was like, I'm just going to do music and didn't want to do food. And when we moved to New York, I intentionally did not want to move here to become like a busking musician. New York, especially at the time, had so many of those. And this one really, really famous drum instructor said to me one time, the last thing New York needs is another drummer. Like it was before. But I was like, point taken, like good. So what am I going to do? And another reason I got into being a musician and being a freelancer, especially, is because I just didn't want to work for anybody. Like I've always wanted to be my own boss. And as much like I was offered a partnership in my first restaurant when I was 22, and I turned it down because it wasn't the kind of restaurant I wanted to own. I always kind of knew in the back of my head I would, even though I rebelled against it. And that, turning that down was both. It was me rebelling, like, no, I'm not going to do this. But also it just wasn't the one that I wanted. Like the one I own now was the vision all along. And so I moved here with an intention. I definitely wanted to work for some cool places, some cool restaurants in New York City, both in the kitchen and behind the bar. And I got the opportunity to do that, which was great. And then I got there was a period where my current business partner had opened a cool little boutique wine store in our neighborhood. We were both, working for larger companies in Manhattan and kind of had met there. But then we realized we lived in the same neighborhood and that he had just opened this cool little wine store. And so he was like, how about you come help out a little bit? You know a lot about wine. You know what you're doing. I could use somebody like you. And within a couple of weeks, he was like, all right, we've got to come up with something. We got to do something together. And we kind of set out to do that. And that was in, I don't know, 2008 or 2009. I can't really remember. But we just started going after stuff then. I'm very operational, like boots in the street kind of guy. And he and his wife, who are my partners, are very behind the scenes, great at like raising capital and all the, permits and filing and all that stuff that I really just don't enjoy doing. And so we just kind of went after it and we opened 4 more of our own places in that time and over the next, several years, and consulted for several more. So we built some nice little business out of it. And it just became a thing. And it was funny, like, I didn't set out to do that really. I not intentionally. I guess like my actions said that, but I wasn't thinking that. I remember the first time a guy called me an entrepreneur. I didn't know what it meant, and I thought he was insulting me. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I like actually looked it up, and I was like, oh, and I was like, is that what I am? Like, I was like, I don't know about all that. It's kind of grown on me since then, but they were just like, we're going to open a restaurant together. And I was like, really? Okay. And then like, they've kind of slowly pulled out of it. So now it's like mainly mine. And, we've sold other businesses. We've closed other businesses. But now we're down to kind of just the 2, where it's the wine store and the restaurant that we collectively own and run. I'm involved in other projects as well, but yeah, it was just kind of this meandering journey where I wasn't like really going after it. At least I was telling myself I wasn't, but I guess my actions were saying, yeah, he's going after it. To the point where anytime there was a new build out because we live and our places are along this commercial strip in Brooklyn. Like I literally live right above one of the places. where there's storefronts dotting it. There's 25 storefronts in like 2 blocks. So anytime the paper went up in the windows and like construction workers started to go into a place, people would stop and say, "What are you doing now? What's in there?" "Oh, not me, not me." I just got that reputation. I just think it's funny that it's just like a guy working hard, but I guess that's it. Like you work hard, that's what people see and expect.
So awesome. And then, so what are some of the responsibilities of running your own restaurant?
Well, it's changed, especially with COVID and all the lockdown and restrictions that we've had. Early on, it was kind of like all hands on deck. We were so busy our first year; it was just remarkable. We opened at the end of 2015, so all of 2016 was just scrambling. We were drowning. We could not keep up with the business. We'd have 20 people staff a day.
Oh wow!
And it's a small place. It's 1,000 square feet. I mean, we had people waiting for weeks to get in there, and it's New York. There's restaurants everywhere, but people were showing up as it was the first restaurant they'd ever seen. It was pretty crazy. I mean, it was great.
Why do you think that happened?
Our neighborhood had not seen anything new in a long time. It's kind of like a quiet little sleepy neighborhood, even though we're 8 stops from World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. We're like right next to everything, but we're nestled in this like special spot. It really paid off during COVID, I gotta say. We always knew this was like kind of this angelic little place, but it showed us why more recently, and there's been a big spike in local pride since then for the people that stayed. But yeah, it was just like a quiet little place, and we brought in like a real chef, and this guy had worked for Mario Batali at Del Posto and some other places, and we make our own pasta. Our like regular items on our menu are like baby octopus and duck ragu. So it wasn't just like spaghetti and meatballs. It was more authentic Italian and European styled, and the place is like really pretty inside. We put several $100,000 into the architecture, so it was nice. So I guess that's why. But to answer your question, the duties definitely morphed along the way. So at that point, we had different managers for different things. Then things started to slow down, especially like all of New York City saw a big turn after the election of 2016. It just like really hit people hard. People already started to leave the city at that point, and there was like huge increase, living on people's incomes. It was just like nobody knew what was going to happen next. There was almost like fear, and that's like as a death sentence for consumer spending. People spend well when they're super confident. When they're not, they're a little bit more conservative with their cash. So places all over the city started to feel it. Places have been closing here with rapidity for a while. It's really exacerbated right now, but this was going on definitely since 2017. And so at that point, I became the head person there. My partners, everybody kind of splintered, and people took over different projects and different things. So I took over 100% there, and I really tried to set it up where I had a full staff. So I wasn't, washing dishes or making drinks or serving or anything like that. I was there support. I was there for training. I was there as the figurehead and outreach. And I dealt with all the back end stuff. So I dealt with all the finances, all the permitting, everything, that a normal person that worked there would have no idea about. But lately, since the shutdown, my entire front of the house left the city. Literally, all my servers and bartenders were just like, bye-bye. And my entire kitchen staff stayed. So I haven't had to cook. But I've definitely had to wash dishes. I've made every drink that has come out of the restaurant for the last months. I haven't had a day off. They closed dining room on March 16th. I've barely had an afternoon off, like to stop and do something like this, because I'm at the wine store every day during the afternoon usually. Today I was there briefly and about to do this, but I'm at the restaurant every night, every drink. I've taken almost every phone order. My wife has been helping a lot, but she's a teacher. So she's starting back to school now, even though it's modified. So my responsibilities are going to go up again because she's going to have less time to be there. So now I'm like very hands-on. Plus, I still have to take care of all the back end stuff. But they just announced yesterday that dining rooms in New York can begin to open at 25% capacity starting September 30th. So I'll start to bring people back in to help me out because I'll need it. It's been good though. Like we hustled, we worked really hard. At the first 3 months, we didn't touch a dime from the place. We just left the money in the bank to make sure the place survived. We took care of our staff. We took care of our closest vendors, especially the local ones. But now we're in a good position. Not all businesses and restaurants in New York City can say that right now. So.
You must feel good about that. These surviving these uncertain times, and you must feel a sense of like gratitude or appreciation for all the work that you and your wife are putting in, and I'm sure other people too.
Yeah. No, 100%, and validation too. I started hosting my show, which is called the Entrepreneurial Web a year ago. And, kind of got just thrown, and, I didn't come up with that name either. The station manager was like, I'd love for you to host a show about entrepreneurship. And I was like, this again, that word again, here we go. So I just kind of got thrust into that and I had to market it. And that's when I really got active on social media and discovered you and people like Damon Johnson, who's my boy. I talked a lot about it over the last year, and I've definitely been through some like business battles and suffered losses and wins and everything. But this was very validating in terms of all the things that I've ever said, all the things I thought I knew about business and entrepreneurship. That's been branded in my soul through this experience. So I feel much more confident talking about that and giving advice, which people come to me for all the time in regards to that. So gratitude that we still have our business, that we can still, employ people and make our neighborhood a nice and safe place. The cops always come through and they're like, thank you for adding more lights to the street at night, because before there was a lot more crime where we're at, because there were no businesses. It was just crazy. And so they're grateful. So for all those things and to be able to continue to offer that, and some of the just outstanding things we got involved with during COVID. One of the things I was really proud of was being a partner with Feed Brooklyn Heroes, which was an organization that raised money from just locals and would summon restaurants to provide meals for hospital workers and work who either had no access or no time, because literally the hospitals, the cafeterias closed in the hospitals. Right. Every hospital in New York City is surrounded by hundreds of places to eat. That's like a hot spot. Couldn't even go outside. Most of the workers, they were so busy in the peak of all this, they couldn't even stop to go outside, go get food, or they felt like it wasn't safe because they were contaminated. They were around us, and that was just like amazing to be a part of. At first when they first got to me, I was like, no way we can accommodate this. Like 100 to 200 lunches delivered by noon, crazy. But we did it. We did our first run, but it got easier, and then we ended up doing thousands of lunches.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was just such a great thing to be a part of and like a morale booster. So all those things definitely gave me so much gratitude and validity, and it was the inspiration that we need, the morale boost that we needed to continue, because there were days where it was not like that. There were some days, there were some hard days. There were days I'd open the bank account and be like, oh no, and I wasn't in a position anymore to add any more money to the business, even though I had it. It was like, this could be this could be a dying car. Like I'm not putting anything in right now. And to come out of that on top definitely feels good, because there were some lows, boy.
Fantastic, and it must feel nice, like to be able to keep the business going, employing people, but yet also doing your part to help the frontline workers. And then it actually must have felt really like good that the cops actually recognized like your contribution to the local community, because that's not every day because they're obviously busy. But the fact that they were like, oh, this is helping this particular zone, right? Yeah.
And we've always been active in our community because, like I said, we live right here, my partner and I, and between us, like we have 6 kids. We have 3. We've all gone to local schools and been on the local sports teams and all that. And we've always supported. So we always, felt like active community members and supported. But again, this is another one of those periods where it really, and not accurate way. It just felt really good. Like people were really freaking out, and some suffered major losses, some financially, some physically, some both. To just do it with a smile and like with no expectation in return. Be like, let me just help. That felt really great. This subsequent support has also felt really good.
Awesome. And then so let's mix it up a little bit. So what obviously sticking with the theme of food and music, but I'm curious to know what role, if any, does music have in creating ambience in your restaurant?
Well, I always love to have the right music on. Now, the right music, it's very subjective. There's the right. For me, one time I did our Wi-Fi or something went down, so I just had to grab my iPad and open up my iTunes, and whatever was downloaded on my iPad was what we got, and it was the weirdest music, and it was playing through the speakers of the whole restaurant. And the bartender looked at me at one point and he goes, "I think you're stressing everybody out. Can we change the music?" I'm a lot of what I studied in school and since has been the music of the Caribbean, Central and South America. Like I said, it started with, playing roots reggae, but super fond of like indigenous Peruvian music and all of Brazil. The indigenous music of Puerto Rico, not what everybody thinks of as salsa and merengue. Playing on bomba and some of the more leading to West African music as well. So we're constantly playing that kind of stuff. Every night it's a little so good, especially on Labor Day. West Indian played in Brooklyn. Was there for many years. So this year's like put on some soca and we rocked the night out with that on. But I got TikTok because of freaking Gary Vee. And I started TikToks all the time because he kept talking about it. And I'm like, really? It's super paid off, though. It was 100% on point. It's a trip. Most of what I do on TikTok these days is fitness based. But I would do videos for the restaurant and for the wine store on TikTok because they were short. And it was the only way you could use a lot of that pop music and put it on your Facebook or Instagram page and not get blocked by Facebook and Instagram as long as it had the TikTok logo embedded in it because they deal with the royalty for that. So now I'm like super fond of like this, like top hits music, which I always rebelled against. But my daughter will walk in the restaurant, my 13-year-old, and she's like, "Dad, this is a great playlist." It's funny. I just kind of frowned upon that kind of music my whole life. I remember playing a gig like 15 years ago in Manhattan, and a friend of mine at the end of the show, he was like, "I never thought I'd see the day where you played a Britney Spears song." And I was like, I played a Britney Spears song? Like I didn't even know. He was like, "Totally, bro. And you were rocking out to it." And I was like, "Oh, no." It was just always like the worst thing that could happen to me. And now I just I don't even care. I don't know I don't know the names of the people. I know the tunes, but it's just like from what I hear on TikTok. And I'm like, yeah. Like totally into it. So I just I really try to create, and anybody that really knows the service industry will say this, you're constantly creating an experience. Even when you come into the wine store, you're not selling people a bottle of wine. It's important to have like some form of like enjoyable music on. Obviously, not everybody's going to love it, but just get people excited and talking. And then when you're selling them a bottle of wine, it's not about like how the wine place other than where they're at, which is why they're in the first place, right? Because they're unhappy with where they want to transport. They want to get out a little bit. And it's the same when you come into any business, when you come into a restaurant, you really want to make them feel like they've escaped. And I think that's the biggest draw, especially in New York City, for a place like that. You want to forget about your responsibilities to like have to do dishes, to have to clean up the kitchen. You want to kick back. You want to be in this environment. So to not be too subjective about it, but create a place where they feel like they've done that. And that's what I always strive for. I think about the whole, one thing I neglected for a long time with lighting. I'm just like blind to lighting, which is a funny thing to say, but lighting is so important. And thankfully I have like really smart partners, because they were like, dude, we got to put good lighting. Okay, whatever you say. We spent thousands of dollars on these lights, but people come in and are like, your lighting is amazing. You couple that with some good music and some good smells from the kitchen, a little tink from the glasses behind the bar, and all of a sudden people are like, this is it. And it's that experience. So it definitely plays a part.
Awesome. So obviously you probably love food and beverages a lot, because you obviously work in this industry. So I'm curious to know, what is your favorite meal and beverage of choice?
Well, I typically only eat one meal a day, and it's usually pretty late. I kind of readopted a diet. Before, it was never conscious. People weren't talking about it, but I just never ate before like 2:00 in the afternoon. Kind of growing up, I like in high school, I always skipped lunch, and never ate breakfast. And I would kind of only eat one late meal a day. And then people are like, oh, that's bad for you, as I got older. And like, they're like, don't do that. So I kind of adopted other things, but I'm just kind of back to it now. And now they call it intermittent fasting, but it was just me listening to my body. But yeah, these days, I eat one big meal late at night, usually after everybody else has eaten, all the customers, once they're all done and gone. So like last night, I think I ate dinner at 11 p.m. Yeah. And that's normal. And then I won't eat in the morning. I'll wake up and have a couple cups of coffee. I always do workout in the morning now. I'll eat something small maybe in the afternoon, but I go a solid 14 hours a day without eating. And then I'll eat one big meal at the end of the night. That's it. And that's my favorite.
Interesting. So like, I know for me that I have to eat like super regularly, otherwise I get nauseous, lose concentration, and I get grumpy with people. Does it not affect you at all? Like, do you not crave food?
Not really. No, not like during the day. I feel like it just slows me down. And my dad was exactly the same. And he was like an ultra athlete. He was an Ironman. He ran marathons, triathletes. He's still in his late 60s. He's a competitive bodybuilder. The guy's just crazy. But he was the same way. So I'm kind of built like him as far as that goes. And I watched him do it, and yeah, I feel like lighter on my feet. I feel faster. If anything, I'll grab like a coconut water and maybe have like a third coffee, and I'm good to go. Whereas if I stop and eat a meal during the day, I'm just gonna fall asleep. I literally just got like the air gets seeped out of my body, and I just fall asleep.
That's really interesting. Like,
yeah,
you've trained your body in that way.
I mean, I didn't train it. I feel like I was just listening to it. And again, when I went against it based off of like talking to nutritionists and personal trainers and stuff, they're like, oh, you should always eat a little something in the morning. Make sure it's protein, what do they say? To wake up your metabolism. Everybody's different. I did that for a little while, and I was like, nah, I'm going back. And I feel much better. Yeah, I feel really good. I mean, they say when you do that, when you go like long periods like that without eating, it forces your cells to rejuvenate. It's really good to just like detoxify your body. I didn't know all that when I first started doing it, but I've learned that since. And I'm like, I've put enough toxins in. It's probably a good idea.
Right on. Awesome. So let's pause for a moment and have a little tea fact.
Yeah.
So today's tea fact is, during afternoon tea, the person nearest the teapot is expected to pour the tea, and not the person of higher authority. So this is going back, obviously, quite a few years ago to when there was more of the class system, etc. So it's basically telling you, if you don't like pouring tea, try not to sit nearest the teapot. And that comes from teahowl.com. Fascinating, isn't it?
That's great. I was thinking about you the other day because I tried out this new. I know when you came on my show, I was asking you about tea a little bit. And thing I was really into root teas, if that's even a thing,
Yeah.
like ginger and turmeric. I don't make that in the summer because it's a huge pot and it's been too hot to like have a hot simmer hours in the air conditioning department in New York. I found this coffee mixture by Four Sigma. It's lion's mane and chaga mushroom. They call it a tea, and it's mixed with organic instant coffee, ground coffee as well. But someone was like, "You got to try this stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, not for nothing. This is pretty good." So what's the story with like the mushroom tea, like chaga and lion's mane? Is that actually tea? I wanted to ask you this: if it's made from mushroom.
I don't actually know. I'm not gonna lie.
Good Twitter tea fact.
I'll go do some research and let you know what I discover about that. Perfect. Thanks for my homework for the day. Thank you. That's all good. Awesome. So then where we go next. All right. So you're the chairman of the Windsor Terrace Food Coop, correct?
Co-op, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit how you kind of got involved in this particular project and how it worked?
So Brooklyn is home to the largest nationally, maybe even internationally, food co-op, but definitely the largest in the country, but perhaps in the world, and that's the Park Slope Food Co-op, which was established either late 60s or early 70s in the neighboring vicinity to us, just a few blocks away. And so we lived close to it for the last 15 or so years. My wife and I joined when we first moved here. We were members for 10 years. And the whole time I was there, I kind of was like, wow, it'd be great. I've always been interested in business models. I've never done anything nonprofit or not-for-profit. So I'd always kind of thought like, wow, it would be potentially exciting to open a food co-op to kind of like provide that service to a community, but to also get inside nonprofit and not-for-profit business structures. So it must have been like 2013. There was only one small, they don't have like big grocery stores in New York City for the most part. Most of them are all, little local stores. So there was like this medium-sized grocery store. It was like literally the only business in our neighborhood that had a parking lot, and it had like 15 parking spaces. It was like tiny, by all.
But prestigious, right? Parking spot in New York,
But it was like so old and decrepit. I mean, it was like walking into a time warp. You felt like you were in the 1950s when you went in there. And the owner finally closed it and sold the property. And they announced that it was going to be, everybody expected it to be a grocery store. It was announced that Walgreens had bought it and it was just going to be a Walgreens. And like there were protests in the street. Like they took over the parking lot. This is like right around Occupy Wall Street time. And they like occupied Key Food or occupied Walgreens. It was so funny. So that was when the conversation started. And a very good friend of mine was kind of one of the central figures of that. And at a certain point, I was invited to come to one of their early meetings where they were just meeting in literally like the Knights of Columbus on 10th Avenue. Nobody knew anything about opening or running a small business. And I walked in, and they were literally ready to give up. And I walked in, and it wasn't just me. It was a couple other people that just kind of breathed some fresh air into it. But it was so cute. They were like, we want to get a 1-year lease, right? And I was like, no, like a business does not get a 1-year lease. That's crazy. They were like, oh, like all these things came up. And I was like, all right, I'm going to help you guys out. And then, like I said, it was a good friend of mine. He and I just kind of teamed up and we became part of like the core fabric of what became the Windsor Terrace Food Co-op. So like 18 months of research and planning, and we signed a lease in January of 2015 and opened in March. And it's literally a community-owned grocery store. It's small. It's about 700 square feet, but we have everything. Household needs. My household buys almost everything we need from there, and we have control over who we get our food from. We use a lot of local farms and regional farms going out to Long Island, up into the Hudson, the Finger Lakes, into New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And it really just it empowers you, and you get to keep all the labor is voluntary. So we have just a couple managers that we pay to make sure everything runs smoothly, but otherwise all labor is voluntary and free, and that's what gets you your discount. So it's really great food at the best prices. Really just empowers the community, and then that place too does a tremendous amount of outreach and community support for other local nonprofits and community-based initiatives. So it's been a pleasure. It's not been easy. It was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. But I'm definitely proud of that one and my participation in it. I've never made a dime from it. It has been completely a labor of love. In fact, I've done nothing but invest money into it. Like sometimes it just literally something went down and I just had to pull money out of my own pocket because it was just like that was the only way to make it happen. Maybe I'd grab like some bananas the next time I went in, but yeah, completely a labor of love, and I'm very proud of that.
Awesome, and it's still going?
Yeah, absolutely. We did great through all this because people did not want to go into big grocery stores.
Right.
And it came down to like this service experience where we were able, it's a members only grocery store. So we were able to poll our members and say, how would you like to shop? What would you like to see happen? And we took all that feedback and we provided it. So most people wanted curbside pickup, and so nobody was coming into the store for a few days a week. And the staff and managers literally sanitized everything, would package it up. You would pay over the phone. You would show up, you'd call from outside. They would just set your food out on the curb, and you knew that it was clean and that it was safe and that the people that had prepared it for you were your neighbors and they had your best intentions and their safety in mind. So it became very intimate. We our own internal way of ordering online without developing some fancy website. So it was great. It was a really great experience. Our sales went way up. It really helped us kind of get ready for the next phase of what I hope is coming. And we've continued to do really well since.
Also, man, it strikes me like it's kind of a running theme throughout the conversation. It's all about that experience in like different contexts and getting to know the people from your suppliers to your customers to your staff, and really creating that like community element almost.
And I'm very fascinated by the way everything works. Like I always want to know how something works, not just like what's the end product. It's almost like, and certainly finance is not the main reason for what I don't my earnings are meager, especially if you envision a restaurant owner as being like, wealthy. They're not.
Well, you look happy and you're giving back to the community, and people recognize that, and that's more important. And you're still living, yeah.
And that's what I chase. I don't chase the dollars. I figured out ways to be happy and make enough. Like I still rent an apartment. I've never owned a home. I don't own a car. There's a lot of things I don't have, and I don't care. I definitely love what I do. You couldn't have gotten through the last 6 months. You didn't love, and I mean love, not like, oh, I kind of loved it. Like, I think I love this. Like, if you didn't love it, you would not survive because the pressure was too tremendous, it would be like one of your closest family members being sick and you having to be there with them and like get them through it. That's what it was like. And you do that out of love. And I enjoyed most of it. I had a smile on my face every day. But yeah, I do love building community. And I do love figuring out how things work. What are the inner workings? How does it operate? Why? What makes it better? What makes it more efficient? Why do you not do this but do that? Like, what are the real reasons why? So I'm always asking, like, why? That's a big question for me. Why is it necessary? Why is it not? And being able to answer that.
Fantastic. And then so let's jump from that into. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but let's see. So you're involved with the Food Forward series for midweek productions?
Yeah. My restaurant was featured in it for our work with the hospitals, and that just came out. It's just streaming this week. It's free to log in and create an account, and then you can watch all the episodes.
Oh, so okay. So the video like highlights kind of the contribution and the work that you did towards supporting frontline workers.
Yeah, we were, a small portion of it, but they dealt with people throughout the Northeast. There was a fishery outside of Boston, there was, a dairy farm. I can't remember where they were, but somewhere regionally, and other restaurants, and just things like that. And how did people respond? Because we were all kind of put in this situation, in this pinch, and it's like, and you're facing termination, but then you hear that there's like a need somewhere, and you're like, all right, I think, what else are we going to do?
Exactly, right? Also,
so for everybody, it was like a Hail Mary, last stitch effort to help. And then it turned out to be something really cool. So it was like COVID success stories, but not like we made lots of money. It was like we were there for people.
Fantastic. So is community something that's always been important to you? Or is it something more that just naturally happened as you've gone about all these different adventures?
Yeah, I think it was more organic. It was never anything conscious before, but I've always done it. So it all comes down to self-awareness. It took me, 40 years to realize some of the things about myself. And then, so my guest on my show last week was my little brother, and we just talked about like all these things, like where does it come from? And totally, it was like our grandfather was the exact same way. One of my early bosses and mentors who's been on the show, and who I still talk to all the time, I did it working under him and didn't realize it until starting these businesses with my business partners currently, who kind of did the same thing. And it was just so natural to me. And I'm like, where am I getting this from? And then like I was talking to him one time and he was telling me what he was doing at the moment. And I was like, oh yeah, we used to do this all the time. So now it's more conscious. I think it was always in me, but it was definitely just more an organic awareness of it. And now that I'm aware of it, I'm going hard on it.
Yeah. And maybe that progression is the best way it kind of should be, because it happened naturally, and so you kept it simple. You didn't like overdid it, but the impact, maybe you could argue, is more great to more people because it just happened by itself, versus you being like writing on a piece of paper, I need to help Sally, Bruce, and Wayne today, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think expectations and plan kill a lot of things. And it's funny, of all the things that are working for me right now, most of it are things that I did not pursue actively. They just kind of landed. So that I finally just adopted that as my approach. Like I'm gonna keep myself in the middle, just constantly doing things, but I'm really just gonna pay attention and listen to what the universe is throwing at me and respond. And when something there's a favorable resonance, then we'll go with that. And that feels the best, because I don't have expectations. I'm never concerned. I'm never like, oh, what's going to happen next? It's like, I know something's going to happen next. I didn't know this all was going to happen. If
I know what it did.
Man, if you would have said to me in March what has played out, I would have been like, yo, I will crumble. I will fold. Like if you would have told, I was saying to somebody just the other day, if you would have said to me on March 8th, your restaurant's going to be takeout only for 15 weeks. The following 16 weeks, you're only going to be able to seat outside. How long do you give yourself? I would have been like, we'd be done in 2 weeks. We'd be out. We're not going to make it. So if I would have known all that ahead of time, I would have just given up, but we responded in real time. And I just adopted that philosophy. Like, let's see what comes at us, and we'll go like 5-day increments. And that was the reason for our success. Not like, okay, here's the plan, guys. Here's the expectation. If we don't meet these checkpoints, boom, we're out. Those are the people that left, So it's helped me to have that mentality and not chase things so much. Yeah, every now and then go after something. But
awesome. And then let's go towards the final transition. Let's talk a little bit about podcasting and the entrepreneurial web, which I was fortunate enough to be on it. I think it was a couple of months ago now.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this, and how did it start? I guess is the start.
Yeah. So we're coming up on a year. A year ago, July 2015, I was invited to be on another show on this network, talking alternative broadcasting. A gentleman who hosted a kind of virtual a virtual walking tour of neighborhoods throughout New York City. And that particular week was the neighborhood I live in, called Windsor Terrace. He got my information. He always likes to bring on like somebody that does history, but then also somebody who's more current and kind of in the now scene. So he heard about me, got my information from somebody, reached out and asked me if I'd like to come on and do the last half of his show and be interviewed. And I was like, sure. So I go to the stage, which at that point was on the upper side. Cute little station. I wish they still had that one. The new one's more convenient, but the other one was so nice. So we do this show, and he's asking these questions. Is my involvement like this? Like how involved? And at the end of the show, the station manager was literally like, "Do you want to host a show?" Never thought about it. I was like, Gary Vee said a good idea.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah. He was like, I think he said, you got a great thing, radio. He invited me to do a show, and this was the executive director, and he was like, I know about entrepreneurship, and I think it's right up your alley. And I'm like, again, here we go, that bad word. But I was like, sure, there's some investment, but I decided it would be the best thing for me and for my businesses and for what I was looking to do with my life. And I just took a shot at it with no experience at all. I've been a performer since I was like 11 years old, so I knew I could get up and talk and not be shy. The first couple of shows were audio only, and then we started video, and it's live too.
Right.
Live every Friday.
The challenger.
Yeah, well, but that part didn't scare me at all. I was just like, oh, great. I wanted to do the video prematurely. He was like, let's do a couple shows with just freeze up or panic or throw up or anything. And I was like, all right, great. And then by my third show, he was like, you're ready. So the performative aspect of it is definitely exciting for me. I love that kind of in the moment. Again, it's like chaos and you make an order out of it. But I literally prepared nothing. I just walked into the studio with my guests, and my first, definitely like the first dozen were people that I knew well, that I knew I could talk with at length. And even if I kind of fumbled, they would make the show good. And then I started to get more and more confident and bring on people I didn't know. Then I got into like absolute strangers, and we did everything in studio up until my last in studio show was March 13th. Then we went to Zoom since then, and that it really helped, and it was something I would never have been into prior. I always wanted it to be intimate and in person, but it forced me into a place that I wasn't really fond of going, and then it turned out to be the best thing. It really helped with the marketing and outreach, and I met so many and so many experiences. Not that is bad, but it just really helped see the bigger picture and what's available by going through that process. So that was good.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on it, but do you think the style of interviewing and even improvisation and going with the flow of the conversation, do you think it's improved as you've hosted more episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I've gotten more comfortable as a host and started to think more about style. Yeah, I'd listened to like 2 Joe Rogan podcasts before doing my otherwise. I did no homework or research. Since I've listened to and watched some other ones, and I still want to be like Joe Rogan. But yeah, I feel like I'm finding my own little voice, and it's different depending on the guest. I mean, some of my guests are a little more dry, so I'll tame my humor down. When it was me and my brother, like close, there was a lot of smack talk. And I still have so much room to grow, but yeah, I mean, having to do things like this where you're virtual and remote and you've got like latency and the sounds going in and out, and sometimes there's no video. I mean, it really puts the pressure on you, but you still want to be entertaining and informative. And so it forces you to like just come up with solutions. So it's been great helping me do that.
Right, and I would definitely agree. Sometimes you just have to work through the technology, because you can't necessarily fix the technology, because there's things that you just don't decide, like how good is the internet connection going to be today, and that sort of thing. So I'd agree with about trying to stay positive and entertaining and informative. So, what has been your most challenging moment, like when you've been doing these live shows, and how did you deal with it in the moment?
So 2 times, for whatever reason, my audio, just like how it started for us, like I had the headsets on and the mic and everything, and it was just dead right when we're going live at noon. And so it's a live audio broadcast through talkradio.nyc, a live video broadcast on Facebook. And, the show comes on and my theme music and everything, and then it's just like crickets. And I'm like tapping and hitting buttons, and I'm like plugging in on things. That's happened twice. The bead of sweat running down my head. And then when you come out of it, like the second time it happened, I did not know the guy at all on the show the second time. And it was so funny when I finally got but it was probably 30 seconds, but felt like 10 minutes, that situation. And as soon as it kicked in, it was like I had just won the Super Bowl. I just celebrated. Like it just set the show off in such a good way. Like we just had a great time after that. So it's like, how you make friends after like something crazy happens. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it was like, and we just kind of connected. Another show, this was like really tough. The guy is a friend of mine. He just lives right around the corner from me, but we were in our own apartments doing the show because it was like 6 weeks ago and everybody's still trying to like create some distance. He wasn't, I checked in with him the day before. He was like, yeah, I'm totally good to do it. And then that morning I texted him. I was like, just checking, make sure you got everything you need. No response. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure everything's fine. I spoke to him last night. It's like 5 minutes to noon. I'm calling him. He's not answering his phone. I'm like, oh no. And Sam's like, it's time to go on. And I'm like, did the guy log on yet? He's like, nope. So I get on and I'm just like, uh-oh, he's not there. Like I got to do a whole show by myself, like impromptu. And I would have done it. I would have come up with something. So like 5 minutes in, I'm just like talking, I'm like, and he finally logs in. And I'm like, oh, sweet, you're here. But he couldn't get his video working. So even though people could hear them, they could only see me. And I was like, sorry, guys, you're stuck with this the whole time. Like knowing that the whole time, like then when there's nothing else to look at, you want to make sure you're not like, So I had to be like focused and pay attention, like not wander, especially as he was talking. It's easy to just kind of like drift off and you don't realize like you're doing something weird with your ear. That was a tough one. And I just kept making silly jokes like it's too bad you can't see Matthew because he's much more attractive than me. I was just doing stuff like that to keep it entertaining. And I love to use humor as a way to diffuse uncomfortable situations. And I'll do it at my own expense. I would be the first person to throw myself under the bus and degrade myself just to make other people feel better, or to make a situation less uncomfortable. So I did a good amount of that, and we got through. That was a tough one though.
Nice. And then, so what advice would you give someone who maybe is thinking about starting their own podcast or talk show or radio? It all falls under the same umbrella, really.
Definitely. I would say just start. If you have a itch, you need to scratch it. And there's no, I mean, I started with like the fancy studio and everything, you know, and technicians and all that stuff. But that didn't really matter because soon we were forced into the street. And I was fortunate because there were 2 weeks or 3 weeks where the station was shut down. One was the Friday right after Thanksgiving, and then the Fridays after New Year's, the station was shut down. And I was just getting started, so I was like, I'm not trying to miss a week. So I just figured out how to broadcast myself, and I did it for my restaurant just on my phone, like I'm doing right now. And that was really low tech, and it came out really great. You know, it was totally fine. I think you really just need to get like the most basic equipment and just hop in and do it.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll learn along the way. I mean, it's like I trained martial arts for 5 years. And I tested in 1 day a week and do like 6 classes and see like long-term improvement. But if you even did 15 minutes a day every day, you would get significantly time, and that would just hop in and do it. Focus on just like your volume, be consistent, but just get in, hit people up, and bring guests on. And just you'll learn as you go. Listen to experienced people like Teawithmike, see what he has to say. Ask questions to people who have been doing it. But just hop in and get going. That's the best advice.
And I'm finding it seems the more complicated you make it and added all of these like recommendations. Oh, you need this microphone and you need this. It almost like makes it worse.
It can totally make. I mean, today I was like, oh, I'm going to use the headphones in my lav mic, which are nothing. They cost $50 total. But even that Skype was like, no, not today. So here we're just using the most basic thing, and it's just the native mic on my phone and the native video, and you're just using the same. Well, I think you have a podcast mic, but that's okay. But and some of the best shows come with like not great quality,
That's
and
true.
if people are interested, they'll watch it anyways. Like if you're engaging them and intriguing them, they call it offering value. That's a new one for me. Everybody's talking about offer value, and I'm like, okay, like how? Like I know how to do that in a store. Like here's a discount or whatever. You got to engage people. You got to get people excited. That's value. If you're doing that, they'll swim through all the muck and mire to listen to what's happening and watch what's happening because you've engaged them, because you've got them pumped. The other advice: get people pumped.
Even the most successful people and the people with huge teams behind them, like Gary Vaynerchuk, their tech isn't always up to scratch.
Yeah, the tea with Gary Vee, that was like times where it was like, and they would just stop. They would just like disappear for a while.
Or he slumped on the table, or like goes off in the middle of the show to make coffee, Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, just get up and go. That's it. Just do it. I think a lot of times the more real you are, the better it is. If you try to get too polished, you don't ever want to create. You want to reduce the amount of barriers between yourself and people, especially one of the benefits I want to get from the podcast is I want my businesses to do better because people are excited about what I'm talking about, what I'm doing. And in business, it's always about reducing barriers. You can't reduce them all. You never will reduce them all. You'll never remove them all, but you need to reduce them. And I think when you come across as too polished and too like fancy, you remove yourself from people, know?
This is not real.
When you real, people are like, I can relate to that. I see when people can see themselves in you, that's when you have their attention. So yeah, it's good advice.
Fantastic. Lots of great conversation. Now let's close our conversation for today. But not for forever. You can ask me a question of your choice.
Oh, why did you start a podcast?
I started podcasting because I've always liked people and getting to know new people, and theater and entertainment has always been my strongest interest. And class I enjoyed the most in school. And then I also worked in the industry. And then I never actually heard of what a podcast was until a year and a half ago. And so the Tea with Mike show and all this happened by accident because I needed something to do for a college project. And we had a guest speaker who's also been on the show that first said the name Gary Vaynerchuk. So that was, both of those things were like happening at the same time. And at the beginning of the show, when it was when I was learning and I was exploring, it got a lot of like negative criticism from college instructors and classmates because my classmates thought it was kind of like a cop out for the particular assignment that we were doing, and it got a few dodgy looks from the instructor who'd been teaching for 20 years with their PhD because it was so like out of the box and obviously not what they learned in school, right? You know, as your traditional essay or whatever. So that's kind of how I started, and then it started off as a social media live. But then I changed that because there was comments scrolling through the whole thing. Started with super dodgy writing.
Yeah, I saw one of those, and I was like, "What are these people talking about?"
Yeah, so that's kind of how I started podcasting, and then just learning and growing, just like when you were talking about jumping into doing your podcast and just going with the flow, with the chaos sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, guys, this was another episode of the Tea with Mike show with Jeremiah. And make sure you check this out at teawithmike.com. Thanks again, Jeremiah.
Thank you.
It's the Tea with Mike show.